September 4th, 1972. The Price is Right premieres on CBS. It would eventually go on to win 6 Emmys, 12 Golden Globes, and 57,000 discarded dog testicles. Welcome to The Revisionists. I'm Brian Flynn.
I'm Zach Powers.
And hot dog summer in the city, we got Malcolm Nygaard with us.
Yeah, his neck is famously both dirty and gritty. The back, specifically.
I'm only seeing you on Zoom. Your neck looks perfectly clean and smooth to me.
Fellas, I work outside. Let me tell you, this summer has been a scorcher.
God, I cannot imagine working outside anymore. Listeners, this is not a neck evaluation podcast. Although, if it were, we'd have 3 fine specimens right here with
Just
us.
real quick, you can't imagine the concept of working outside anymore?
Okay.
That's
a well-known idiom. And I will not stand for this
I have
pedantry.
never heard the idiom, I can't imagine working outside anymore.
No, but, I can't imagine. It's like a fucking thing that everyone goddamn says at some point in their godforsaken lives.
But still...
Guys, I had a whole Gatorade, and at some point I'm going to have to go work outside and come back.
I can't imagine. Sorry, yeah, it pushes the bounds of the fucking human imagination and spirit. There we go.
I mean, I feel like it's a normal part of life to occasionally go outside and, lift something or move a thing.
No, when I go outside, I'm exclusively stationary.
It's only leisure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
No, it's not even leisure, because that involves some work. It's mainly just light photosynthesis.
I feel like I've run us off on the wrong track.
That's okay. That's what we do. Part of the fun is getting us back on the right path, which I am failing at.
It's like the trolley problem for podcasts.
Yep, that's our unique selling point. Listeners, if you're new to the show, what we do each episode is we take a topic from history. One person presents the official pull the correct lever on the trolley problem version of events, and another person comes up with the pull the horse medicine lever on the trolley problem version of events. The real story and the alternate history. To put it in a way someone could reasonably understand.
Sure.
And then the winning story becomes the truth of the world in a way that we're sort of uncomfortable with since the events of 2020 and 2021.
It is interesting you put it that way, because the trolley problem, obviously the crux is you pull the lever and you're actively killing one person instead of passively killing 5 or whatever, right? Yeah. So the alternate history in many ways is the actively killing one person, as opposed to the real history where you passively let thousands die as you recite the story of what truly happened.
Honestly, sometimes when we talk about monsters, that's my strategy with an alternate history.
Well, it's more like it's more like an Earth 2 trolley problem.
Yeah,
where if you pull the second one, you have a world with way more blimps, and the whole sky is just really sepia toned, so you can tell it's different.
Everyone's got hats with gears on it.
Oh yeah.
I don't know why Marvel hasn't come to us to tie in with their What If series, because that's basically what we do here.
That's
true. We deserve Marvel's money. They've lost Scarlett Johansson. We're the next on the list.
And as always, it's just about IP. You guys have these properties.
Yeah. I am willing to sell out and put Captain America in every single one of my alternate histories.
Look, I basically am Odo the Watcher. So,
I believe it's Udu, but...
Udu, yeah.
Guys, it's Uatu, and if you're just going to make me correct everything... I didn't want to do this.
Well, yeah, you're the most uniquely qualified to do so. So
what if a nerd came on the podcast?
God, I would not allow, because this is exclusively a jock zone. I couldn't even finish that. Also,
the
jock
worst
zone
thing is that Uatu saw us mispronounce his name both times.
Yeah, and that's just awkward. He's not mad, he's just uncomfortable.
He actually saw it in over 96% of all realities, unfortunately. So,
that 4%, though, that's what we're trying for. We are in the middle of our miniseries on spies, and our our most recent episode, Matahari, with John McCoy, I can report to you now, because the embargo is lifted, that the alternate history won out, which was Zach's very succinct alternate history, where Matahari and Coco Chanel peed in a magic fountain.
So their fates were switched at the last minute.
Were switched.
Even though part of my history was encouraging people to vote for the real history.
Yup.
Because it's underreported. And I think people should know the truth of Matahari, but sure.
Look, again, increasingly uncomfortable with one of the core premises of the show. So, listeners, if you have something we could replace it with, like, I don't know, recipes or something like that, fucking let us know. We can still talk about history, that we just don't have to pretend that some dick and butt story is the truth.
Sorry, I just heard white noise all the way through after you just said I had to follow John McCoy, so I'm just recovering from that. Gem. A total gem.
Yeah. Great man, great voice. One of the most well-researched and well-documented guest histories we've had. So thank you to John. But this time we are talking about Francis Walsingham. Finally, someone who's not from the 20th century.
Yeah. First time in a while.
Yeah. Zach, you're doing the true story.
That's true, yeah.
And Malcolm, you're doing the alternate.
I'll try.
All right. Frankly, that's my attitude each and every time. But Zach, whenever you're ready, take it away.
All right. Francis Walsingham was born in approximately 1532. This is going to be one of those where it's long enough ago that some of the dates are going to be like, maybe this happened this year or the year before or the year after. So, just be ready for that. He was born to a wealthy, connected family in Kent, a Protestant family. That will be important. His family had relations with Anne Boleyn, who was his aunt by marriage, or his aunt by marriage's sister, I should say, and also to the gentleman of the Privy Chamber to King Henry VIII. The gentleman of the Privy Chamber did not have anything to do with shitting. It was, in fact, an important role that I think is more or less analogous to Secretary of State or something of that nature. It's a very high-ranking advisor.
So again, just more euphemisms we're building up today.
Correct, yeah.
I gotta go do my secretarial duties, guys.
My minister of the very far interior, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. The interior turned exterior.
Yeah.
So Walsingham went to King's College, Cambridge, before traveling to Europe between approximately 1550 to 1552, and then eventually enrolled at Gray's Inn, which doesn't sound like a thing you should be able to enroll in, but in fact was. It was one of a few different places for qualifying to become a lawyer. It was associated with what would be the equivalent of the bar today. I don't know how 1550s English education works, but that's part of it. So in 1553, Mary I, aka Bloody Mary, becomes the queen, and like so many Protestants, Walsingham is like, I'm going to get the fuck out of here, and goes to Switzerland to continue studying. During her reign, Mary does indeed kill quite a few Protestants and tries to, make the Reformation not be a thing, all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But Mary does die a few years later, and Protestant Elizabeth I takes the throne in 1558, and he comes on home. He's quickly elected to Elizabeth's first parliament, around which time he marries the Lord Mayor of London's daughter, the widow Anne Barne, in 1562. But she dies in 1564, leaving her son from a previous marriage in his care. he marries another widow. I guess widows were his type. Named Ursula St. Barbe in 66.
I love that name.
Yeah. In 67, they have a daughter together who's named Francis. Ooh. Female Francis,
I just got a shiver.
Yeah. The rare daughter with the same name as the father.
No
Carbo,
questions. Continue.
Yeah, you don't see it too often, but he pulled it off. That same year, Ursula St. Barbe's other two sons die in a gunpowder accident. So,
I mean, sorry, that's horrible, but just the phrase gunpowder accident kind of
Again, euphemisms, guys.
to be
like
fair,
it was an explosion. Like they didn't get
Right,
a
so
barrel of gunpowder didn't get dropped on them by a coyote.
if it makes you feel better, it's been over 450 years. So, it's not,
that's- We could let
does
the
help.
healing begin a
Yeah.
little bit. Mm-hmm. But for those two unnamed people.
yeah.
Too soon, guys.
They do have
Too soon.
names. I didn't write them down.
No, I know they have names. Yeah.
John and another one.
Francis.
Yeah. Soon he begins his first foray into what might be considered some of his international affairs and or spy work. There is a plot that is commonly called the Ridolfi plot to replace Elizabeth with Mary, Queen of Scots. And Walsingham works doggedly to prevent this from coming to happen, spreads propaganda, looks into possible conspirators. He interrogates the titular Ridolfi in his own home, as a matter of fact. And the plot is exposed and thwarted.
And he's the one that started the ball rolling where now Facebook has to put a bar underneath saying if something's been discredited, it's like a misinformation.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah. He was all about the truth and ethical integrity, as this story will bear out, I'm sure.
Well, see, the
neither
thing
is Facebook, I understand.
In the 1500s, Facebook was just a guy who went from town to town rating people's hotness and destroying democracy.
Oh, okay. I thought maybe he would literally be taking faces, because that seems like something that would happen.
No, you're thinking of leather Facebook.
Sure. So, soon he was chosen as the ambassador to Paris for England, and he dedicated himself to aiding the Huguenots, who were French Protestants. He worked on finding a suitable French husband, to Elizabeth, and creating an anti-Spanish treaty with France. This would dog him for many years. He wanted the treaty before he accepted a husband, and one of the husbands they offered was had Catholic roots. He didn't like that, and once Elizabeth was past the age to have children, there was a danger that France could have a claim to the English throne. So this whole thing kind of was a constant thorn in his side. It never really fully came to fruition. Mm-hmm. Regardless, he was also there to provide sanctuary to French Protestants who were in power after the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre, when Catholic forces killed a whole bunch of major Protestant leaders in France. Later, in 73, he returns to England, and he is selected Principal Secretary, which is, in fact, the equivalent of Secretary of State. It's, a pretty high position, and he was knighted in 77.
So this one's not the toilet one, then?
No, actually, I think that was more like a principal advisor, and this is the proper
Okay.
Secretary of State. He gains a whole bunch more titles during this time, as you do if you're a successful, upper class person in
Compound
these
interest,
times.
baby.
Yeah, exactly. And during his time as basically Secretary of State, he's a major supporter of the exploration of the New World. He makes new trade routes and is deeply engaged with foreign policy. He supports exploration to find the Northwest Passage. Francis Drake's explorations are pushed by Walsingham and funded by him. And he also has a general idea that if people like Drake can find new lands, maybe they can use that to encourage the Catholics to leave. And go there instead.
That's a what if.
Yeah.
Catholic New World.
Oh no! Speaking as a former Catholic, no, thank you. I don't want to spend my day living in my family's Good Friday celebration. Not celebration. That's not the one you do on that day.
The first Thanksgiving they had to keep. It took forever because they had to keep standing up and sitting down.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and there was always like everyone was like, "Well, is it and also with you or and with your spirit?" Because I can't keep up with this shit.
Where are we at
Yeah.
now? Yeah.
Awful.
Regardless,
Truly, the worst thing about the Catholic Church.
yeah, the changing vernacular.
Yeah. It's
Everything
all
else is actually pretty
evil.
good.
I'm
Nothing
I'm
else.
fine. Yeah. I'm
Yeah,
good.
like there's no major scandals.
yeah.
All the popes have been good.
Yeah.
We can just address it obliquely. We don't need to. All the popes
Regardless,
have been good.
so he pursues pro-Protestant operations abroad, especially in France. He is extremely opinionated when offering advice to Elizabeth I, who describes him as the Moor who cannot change his color in regard to his strident opinions. Now, in today's language, that seems racist. In 1575, it was probably like weirdly progressive because they acknowledged non-white people existed at all and weren't directly racist about it.
Huge, big,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, he was also deeply savvy. He proved this early. There was a French ambassador named Strafford, the guy who replaced him as the French ambassador, who was actually working with Spain and giving them information because he had a big old gambling debt. And Walsingham seemingly figured this out and started feeding that guy false information to funnel over to Spain. At the same time, the pro-England leadership in Scotland is ousted and falls apart, which causes another problem for him as an Englishman. His daughter dies, his other daughter is widowed, and his son, his adoptive son, becomes a war hero. So 1 out of 3...
Francis.
Yeah.
I mean, widow isn't the worst life.
Yeah, no. She's widowed. She also has a stillborn child. It's a bad
My
year.
wife is raising the roof, and I don't know what that means, or if I should be frightened.
Probably nothing.
She's
Probably
been
not.
she's been dusting off her shawls lately, and getting warmed up for long walks on a lighthouse deck. So.
She bought
Yeah.
a box of black armbands from Amazon for some reason.
She keeps impromptu collapsing into strangers' arms, but claims it's an exercise. So, and I believe her.
We got a fainting couch in an alley.
Yes.
We don't really have room for it, but
Yeah, she says it's a trust fall, but also sometimes she says trustee fall. Like she's going to inherit something? I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
Regardless, I'm just kidding. Brian does not have anything of significant value to leave.
Got him.
I have a Nintendo Switch, sir. I will inform
Oh, right.
you.
You can only play one game of Animal Crossing on the damn thing, so. All right. Walsingham was also a fan of torture for interrogation purposes. Catholics suspected of conspiracy or priests were often tortured and often executed. One of these was Edmund Campion, who became a martyr and saint in the Catholic Church. He was hanged, drawn, and quartered for being a Catholic conspirator under Elizabeth I. He was deeply paranoid about Catholics because of the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre he had seen in France, and of course, the fact that Mary the First, Bloody Mary, had killed a lot of Protestants. She burned them alive, so there you go. He employed a large web of informers and forgers and codebreakers who would monitor a lot of correspondence, reapply seals to look like they were never broken, fake letters, all these kind of things. Walsingham got a hold of some letters from the Spanish ambassador to England, a man named Mendoza, that outlined a plot to oust Elizabeth in favor of Mary, Queen of Scots, returning once again. He quickly employed spies in various embassies and found an English co-conspirator named Nicholas Throckmorton, actually a son of one of his old friends, who was clearly involved in the conspiracy. Throckmorton was tortured and confessed. He was then executed, and Mendoza was expelled back to Spain out of England.
That seems less bad than, torture and execution.
Yeah. Diplomatic immunity, I guess. Lethal Weapon 2 took place in 1570s England.
What if?
Yeah, that's another what if.
Yeah.
Let's get, who are the fucking Mel Gibson and the other...
Sure, Danny Glover.
Danny Glover.
Who is,
Jesus.
of course, too old with an E for this shit. With
Love
an E
it.
also.
Yeah.
Shite, I guess you would say. Spain, at this point, had quashed a nascent Protestant rebellion, increasing the power of Catholics in Spain, and indeed increasing the danger to Elizabeth I from outside. So Walsingham creates the Bond of Association, an agreement by all signatories to find and kill any local threats to Elizabeth I. And indeed, after this, Walsingham begins to hold Mary, Queen of Scots, who at this point has been at least mentioned in 2 plots to out Elizabeth I, under tight observation and scrutiny in a moated castle where her letters were screened. Except there was a flaw in security. And that flaw was there were kegs that were smuggled in and out that could theoretically be used to take letters. But this flaw in security was intentionally left by Walsingham to trick Mary, Queen of Scots, into corresponding with possible conspirators. So she and a man named Anthony Babington corresponded about a plot to kill and replace Elizabeth.
Tony Babs, yeah.
Yep. Well, Tony Babs exits the story here because he and 14 others were executed for this plot. And Mary, finally having an active hand in one of these, goes on trial. She accuses trial of working towards her death during the trial. She accuses Walsingham of working towards her death. And he defends his honor, saying he did everything in the service of his country. Eventually, Mary is found guilty. Elizabeth is hesitant to execute her own cousin, but to ease her mind, Walsingham actually asked Mary's warden to, quote, shorten her life. But the warden refused on moral and legal grounds to take extrajudicial sort of implied execution. And eventually, Elizabeth relents and signs the execution warrant. This results in Mary being very swiftly beheaded, actually too quickly, more quickly than Elizabeth wanted, because the Undersecretary of State just brought it over to this council that he wasn't supposed to bring it to. The execution was rushed. This pissed off Elizabeth, who put this Undersecretary in the Tower of London. Walsingham was probably not involved in this because he was deeply ill at the time and not involved in the chambers of the Secretary of State when all this went down, though he eventually...
So you said executed too quickly. I just pictured that he did a really fast samurai strike.
Yeah,
and
that's
he's
what
kneeling
I thought.
10 feet away, and then the head just slowly falls off, and then we see the blood drop come off, and everyone's like, ooh.
Yeah. That's what we can imagine that's what happened. Yeah.
It's Quicksilver came through and did it while everyone was moving in slow motion.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a scene from X-Men, or the Snyder cut, if you prefer.
Yeah. And a fly lands on the sword for speed perspective.
Yeah, exactly. A fly is cut literally in half by the sword in slow motion. Yeah, it's all that shit.
Yeah.
So that's the end of Mary, Queen of Scots. The other main thing Walsingham is known for is he had a lot of merchant spies throughout Spain. Encouraging riots and disruption against the Catholics who ran the place. At one point, the Spanish Armada attempted a movement on England, and Walsingham quickly assembled a force in 1588 to repel them. A naval commander named Lord Henry said that he had, quote, fought more with his pen than many in the Navy had with their enemies, unquote. Walsingham had spies, in fact, all across Europe. He had one of the most active spy rings of anybody in history, and even in the Mediterranean. And he was exceptionally skilled in this regard. One spy may have even been playwright Christopher Marlowe during the years he lived in France.
Which I know we touched on that in, like, an episode from, like, I think a year and a half ago? Maybe.
He's Shakespeare, though?
Oh, was he? No.
You sure? You sure about that?
Personally,
I don't know.
yes.
Roland
I can't remember where the
Emmerich
fuck we
seems
landed
to
on the
believe
show.
so, I believe.
Wait, who believes that?
Didn't Roland Emmerich make that movie Anonymous?
Oh, yeah. And, I'm not really going around basing a lot of my own personal beliefs on Roland Emmerich.
I don't know. That speech in
man.
Independence Day is pretty convincing.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. You know what? I take it back.
So it's also worth noting that from 1571 on, Walsingham had regular periods of bad health. The diagnosis ranged a lot. Not clear exactly what was wrong with him. Anything from urinary infection, diabetes, cancer to kidney stones. Those are some of the ones they listed as possible causes of his ill health. He had trouble urinating and constant pain. But he doesn't die until April of 1590, when his death is attributed to testicular cancer. He's 58 years old. His
Gotta
grave...
get checked, guys.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep,
Gotta
Gotta
check.
do it.
I'm getting to that age, but
Yeah.
I realized as I was saying that I don't really want to talk about my testicular self-exams on the podcast.
You know, you're running a spy ring and you're killing queens and you just kind of think you're on top of the world and you just, you know, it could
And
be
then one day-
anybody.
Yep.
Everybody, get checked.
So he was buried at St. Paul's Cathedral, but his grave was one of the ones lost in the Great Fire of 1666. In fact, on September 4th of 1666, St. Paul's Cathedral burned down and his remains were lost. He's remembered... he's remembered by Catholics as a horrible, ruthless, and, violent, horrible, monster. And he pretty much was ruthless. He's remembered, obviously, somewhat differently by Catholics, though realistically, this was a time period when both sides were pretty fucking violent.
Yeah.
So it's hard to make a strong judgment on what the fuck to think about that, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, this is the same time period that would eventually lead us to something called the 30 Years' War, which lives up to its name.
Yeah.
Which we'll probably get into.
Regardless, that was the life of Francis Walsingham, Elizabeth's spy master.
All right. Zach, thank you. Mm-hmm. Malcolm, whenever you're ready.
Oh, boy. Okay. Well, I kind of wrote up like a book report.
Perfect.
It's been a while, too. All right. Born in 1532, a young Frank Miller had dreams of only one thing.
Oh, no.
To someday meet the Queen.
I'm
Different
hoping,
one.
so I'm figuring we're going to have
Different one.
all the...
Okay.
No,
because I was going to say,
coincidence.
are all the women in this story going to be prostitutes or
well,
damsels
London
in
was the
distress?
first Sin City, yeah, but
Yeah.
coincidence. Frank Miller had dreams of only one thing, to someday meet the Queen. But he was born to poor farmers, and instead of attending a high-born school, he spent his childhood working on his father's farm. Frank was eager, but he was prone to daydreaming. It wasn't uncommon for him to nod off at the plow, dreaming of a royal procession in front of the palace. The Queen is waving politely to all her subjects, but stops at the sight of a distinguished Frank in the crowd. She alights from her carriage, extending her hand to the young man, who kneels and kisses it with the appropriate admiration.
Sorry, I'm just thinking of Distinguished Franks as like a sort of upper-class hot dog place.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we have those in Chicago. Yeah, they're big.
Yeah, Distinguished Franks. You got sport pepper on it and celery salt.
And the bun is just way too deep.
Yeah, the bun is a bunch of monocles, so for extra crisp.
So he kneels and kisses her hand with the appropriate admiration. At this point, Frank would come to, learning that he had driven the plow clear off the property and was now kneeling in front of a beehive.
Oh,
Covered
is
in
he going to become Candyman?
Is he kissing a beehive?
Covered in poultices over bee stings, he would get an earful from his father about keeping his mind on the work in front of him. But this pattern continued throughout his youth, and after the day he imagined himself christening Her Majesty's next ship, only to realize he'd swung a full bucket of milk through the kitchen window, knocking a vase of dried flowers into the open oven, and starting a spreading fire, he was told firmly that he'd have to find work elsewhere.
Wow. By his parents.
Yes.
That's. Oh. I mean, I thought getting a write-up from my parents was rough, but geez.
It's a good thing Tumblr wasn't around, or he would be on, like, Queen self-insert fanfic Tumblr for sure.
So poor, lost, and hungry with no relevant skills, the young Frank Miller stumbled into a dirty London town in 1549. It was overwhelming, the sounds, the smells, the refinery. He just knew he had to get to one place. Any guesses?
The Buckingham Palace?
Well, Frank was famished, so he immediately followed his nose to an open market. So many open stalls with all kinds of foods, but to an ignorant country bumpkin, it looked like an open farm table back home. He began to grab one of everything, filling his arms with apples, a cheese wheel, 2 baguettes and a big X, a bunch of grapes, a bag of dry tea, some chrysanthemums, and a half cheese wheel that was a different color.
Oh, no. So a cheese wheel and a half. So he is very hungry, is what we're...
Starving. Needless to say, before long, he was being pursued by guards with big pikes and those metal helmets with the big feathers. Confused and scared, he rounded a corner and jumped into a wooden barrel.
Yeah, this is very much the one jump ahead part of his life.
Yeah,
okay.
I mean, also, like, he's got all that food. That cheese wheel is at least 15 hit points. If I remember Skyrim correctly.
Yeah. It was a very tight fit, but for the time being, he was safe. As the hours passed, he began to nibble at the baguettes propped up vertically in between his knees, or pull at the bunch of grapes resting on his shoulder with his teeth. But as we all do after a big brunch, Frank fell asleep. And he awoke with the distinct feeling he was in a brand new location. He lifted the lid to reveal that, in fact, he was. Anyone know where he was?
Now I'm going to say the palace?
Graham's Chinese Theater?
Frank was on the battlefield.
Oh no.
Okay. It was the middle of the war with France, and he had been delivered among some supplies to the army. Frank wandered blindly through an encampment, taking in the rolling haze, the screams of the wounded, and the constant metal clanging. Moments later, taking him in, just soaking it up.
A stroll.
Yeah. Moments later, he was being shouted down by an angry lieutenant. He couldn't understand a word the man was saying, but Frank knew he must be in the wrong. He nodded and saluted repeatedly, making the most compliant, respectful expression he could. And within the hour, he was in a line of soldiers holding the French flag straight.
Oh no.
Yeah.
How did this barrel get over to the French side?
So he sort of just Mr. Magoo'd his way over to almost committing treason.
Just a mishap, yeah.
I guess they saw it was full of cheese wheels and were like, oh, this must belong to France.
Just by smell, yeah.
Yeah. And baguettes, yeah.
He's asleep in the middle of the day. Yeah, no.
The line of troops marched forward, and Frank could do nothing but follow. The French commands didn't help him, but when the line swung left or right, after a jostle, he would adjust. He got mesmerized by the colors of the flag above him at one point, and then when he looked back down, the line was way ahead. Double speed charge with bayonets forward, but he quickly caught up. The battle was a lot, and Frank lost. Yeah.
How many times have you heard that from veterans?
I can't even with this shrapnel right now.
It was a day. And Frank lost many of his fellow soldiers in the gunfire.
Hashtag barely adulting. I think, was the thing with soldiers at that time.
TFW, you go to war.
The musket smoke and the early morning fog began to mix up, and soon Frank could see naught besides the cloth fluttering over his head. He roamed for a while, looking for his unit with some difficulty. He stubbed his toe on a helmet, causing him to bump his nose against his flagpole. And more than once, he walked through a horse pie.
Oh, man.
This is Francis Walsingham's no good, very bad day.
Yeah.
I
mean, also when you follow a battle with that, it's like, oh, that seems kind of nice. I want to step in some horse poop.
To stay brave in the face of hardship, Frank began to imagine more noble circumstances. He was standing at the bow of a punting boat, pushing his pole to guide his passenger along the Thames. Her Majesty lounged in the stern, watching him with playful admiration. He fed off her energy, rowing more cavalierly, one leg up like a great explorer. He twirled the oar like a baton. In fact, Frank was handing the French flag to the English commander, and behind him were several high-ranking French officers who had followed his flag through the fog, and they were all roughly apprehended. But when Frank was grabbed on both arms by guards a foot taller on both sides, his small-framed portrait of the Queen fell out of his coat.
Oh, no. Oh.
Everybody froze. The English commander looked at the picture, and then at Frank, who nodded with solemn affection. Mere days later, to his amazement, Frank was standing in front of... who do we think he was standing in front of?
The logical guess would be the Queen, but I'll say Kate Blanchett, who would later play the Queen.
I'm going to say Paddington.
Ooh, that's good.
That's it. Yeah, good guess. It was the chief tailor at the palace.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Frank was being clothed in finer material than he could dream of on his way to being knighted. But the fitting was a struggle. He got poked a bit with his brooch, which startled him. The ruffled collar was a bit of a hindrance. So
again, this is a man who has seen battle at this point.
Sometimes it could be just as daunting, you know?
It's true.
To be fair, based on this description, he was at a battle, but he wasn't really paying attention. I don't know how much he saw.
So the ruffled collar was a bit of a hindrance. He couldn't turn fully to acknowledge the tailors on either side of him. His new sword was a highlight, and once he was alone, he began a mock fence with it.
Oh, yeah, you got it.
But he did accidentally slash across a painting of a noblewoman. But he was able to fix it by tearing out the offending strip, sliding up the bottom of the painting, making the woman about a foot shorter, but now intact again.
Also, take it from someone who did a lot of high school theater. The first thing you do when you get swords is you fuck around with them.
You mock fence with them. In that moment, he was quite suddenly called for the procession. So he way too quickly sheathed his sword, pinched the fabric of his sleeve and the scabbard. So if he weren't nervous enough, now he had to walk down a red carpet in front of all his idols with an awkward limp, his whole body bent to the right. Meeting, finally the Queen, had a bit of the joy taken out of it, because he had to kneel like a camel to get down. And her sword on his shoulder was a lot colder than expected, too, so that was a surprise, and he made a little sound. When Her Majesty asked for his name, sweaty, crooked, tongue-tied, and starstruck Frank could only fumble out a but ever the model of grace, she knighted him Sir Francis of Walsingham, the site of his great military victory he learned much later.
He's truly a Forrest Gump-esque figure.
He's fucking stumbled his way into it.
There was a large dinner that evening, with the generals, admirals, and political heads to discuss the state of the war with France. Sir Francis, England's newest spy, was delighted to attend what he assumed to be a banquet in his honor, bowing and nodding deeply, magnanimously to every guest and all the servants, and at one point a naked Greek statue. But after enough of what manners dictate, Sir Francis began to roam the party, searching with the hope of spotting a glimpse of anybody.
Jennifer Garner.
Jessica Alba.
The buffet.
Oh!
Courtly Manners was hungry work and he needed refreshment. He found it in the biggest array he'd ever seen. He paused, remembering the last time he assumed a free lunch. But after cautiously observing 3 others take part, he began to load up several plates. Many plates. A few on each arm, and when he could hold no more, he took the apple out of a pig's mouth with his own. Arms full, he turned to find the banquet hall empty. He looked around for a moment, tiptoeing hesitantly forward. Full plates, mouth apple. Through an open door, he saw the military leaders gathered around a large map of the world. Feeling immediately out of the loop, Sir Francis began to look for a place to set down his 5-course meal. He found a much too small table and began a whole routine of trying to safely remove his plates without them falling. Unbeknownst to him, a servant entered the room behind him and placed a large tray of champagnes on the banquet table. He left, and another servant with a huge black mustache and shifty eyes pulled out a vial with a skull on it and began to pour a drop into each glass. Sir Francis had no idea, and at this point was adjusting a Jenga tower of plates with his leg like a ballet dancer. Mouth apple intact. He finally balanced the last little sorbet at the top of the tower and rushed into the meeting he was now quite late for. He immediately bumped into the shifty new waiter who spilled his 14 champagnes, which began to eat into the stone floor with a loud corrosive hiss.
Oh, damn.
Oh.
The room froze. The English commanders looked at Sir Francis, who tried to play it cool, and at the waiter, who also tried to seem cool, but out of his waiter outfit fell a portrait of the King of France.
Oh.
They all looked back at Sir Francis, who broadened his shoulders and puffed out his chest.
Sorry, when you say waiter outfit, I'm picturing just a t-shirt that says waiter on it.
Staff.
Just the most, like, custominc.com t-shirt.
But the word French is crossed out and written above it is English.
Yeah. No, don't tell them you're French underneath.
His career only took off from there. Sir Francis was soon named spymaster by the Queen and became intimately involved in the war with France. He sat in on countless strategy meetings, nodding yes to any map shown to him and signing all documents with an X. There were ups and downs. Sir Francis lost a few of his spies in the field, packing tea and crumpets and jam in all their to-go bags, and waving at a few who were undercover. But there were also great triumphs. Years later, in 1582, now with a full Van Dyke and feathered cap, Sir Francis nodded off at the wheel of a frigate, steering it sideways and blocking a canal, which only 20 minutes later would have been full of French warships. For averting the attack, he of course received a medal, which unfortunately got caught over his nose and then in his mouth as he wetly chewed his thanks to his beloved queen.
I think that's the first alternate history with the phrase wetly chewed.
He was buried in Westminster in 1590, just a few miles from the humble farm he was born to. Historians can't seem to decide conclusively what impact, if any, Sir Francis had to the art of intelligence, but even today, young future spies visit his grave, leaving a small decoder ring or a lunchbox with a false bottom in tribute.
Nice. Malcolm, thank you.
Oh, happy to.
Listeners, before we move on to judgment, I just want to say, hey, we have a Patreon, which is a great way to really show us that you support the shit that comes out of our mouths.
Sure.
But and while we would appreciate any support you'd be willing to give us, there's definitely a lot of worthy causes out there right now, which we'll get to in a little bit. To do
I'm
instead.
pledging right now. Be like me.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
dollar a
Appreciate
month.
it.
Yeah,
Yep.
thank you. And my infant daughter thanks you. Not to give the hard sell to the listeners.
Oh, I'm buying baby food. Oh boy.
So, you can also, send us a letter at revisionistpodcast.com. Just select our contact form, or reach out on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook.
Sure.
Actually, no, not Facebook, because we don't really check that one because it's a hellhole. But anyway.
The other thing you can do that's deeply helpful is to write a written review on iTunes, preferably 5 stars, and you can write whatever the fuck you want. You could just write the words "wetly chewed," and that is as good as any other written review.
I'm doing that right now.
There you go.
I'm getting suddenly so many number mass text messages that just say "wetly chewed."
You guys are on a watch list now. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
That's comes with the territory. But Malcolm, you've got a lot of projects in the offing, but the one people can follow right now is MC University, correct?
Yeah. So if it hadn't sort of come up a little bit, I have a podcast all about the Marvel movies where my co-host and I, we love to just do like a deep dive and not only look at the film, but like really figure out how a cinematic universe does get built in order. We want to trace if clothing carries over, or if background characters become important, or if there's any continuity at all to the Infinity Stones or whatever. And we also break down the film into different categories like character and story, world, and action, which I think is also interesting because we found that instead of now just giving a film a hard pass, like you might have like, the Thor The Dark World stinks. Well, now you can say, hey, actually the world building was really cool and got slept on because the writing was bad or whatever. So it's a really cool journey and companion to the series. We update occasionally, but there's a big catalog right now.
Well, and it's also it works in regards that it is a franchise that pretty consistently you'll get a new film to discuss. As of this recording, I believe Shang-Chi would have come out yesterday, and Spider-Man's not far off in the distance. So clearly there's a lot of
volunteer
material
employed for a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, in addition to all the TV shows and all of that,
for sure,
too. Zach, you co-host Movie Trap, also, which we've discussed in a sort of similar realm.
Of course, yeah. Movie Trap is my other podcast that I do with my 2 friends. It's a continuation of a podcast we did 10 years ago that we restarted because of the pandemic. Basically, one of us picks a theme for our film trilogy, be it like isolation or films directed by a certain person, or failed franchise starters, or we let our significant others pick the movies for that round. We each contribute 1 film in that theme, and at the end, we vote. And whoever wins the best film for that round gets to pick the next theme, and so it continues apace. That's the basic premise. It's just a film discussion podcast. But if you like this, perhaps you will like that as well.
Awesome. As for me, listeners, again, live stand-up comedy, not really a thing that I am super comfortable doing right now. So not much to plug there, but I will say that right now is a good time if you have some extra money lying around to give to, I'm going to point out 2 causes in particular. One is local to Denver. It's the African Community Center, which is going to be doing a lot of work resettling Afghan migrants. and refugees. And you can find that at acc-den.org. And the other one is called Hope for Haiti, which Haiti was, it's been going through a lot for a couple centuries, but the last few months in particular have been very hard. And they need the support. And I've also just seen, like, my typical instinct would be Red Cross, but Red Cross has sort of a troubling history in Haiti, and I've seen a lot of Haitians asking people not to support them. So if you can find an alternate way to give, that'd be fantastic.
An alternate way to give?
Earth 2, baby.
Yeah, fine. We'll go with that.
Give the gift of a blimp.
Yeah, that's...
For the cost of
that is the
one future coffee a day.
Yeah.
That is the most American response you could possibly get. But that brings us to the judgment portion of the show, which falls on my shoulders this episode. And I have to say, I think for giving us a Mr. Bean-esque Harpo figure. Harpo being, yes, my third favorite Marx brother, but still a Marx brother. I'm going to have to cast my vote for Malcolm's alternate history. But listeners, voting is now open on Patreon, and then check out the Instagram feed on Wednesday, September 15th, for the final round of voting to have your say on that.
All right.
Yeah.
It was a well-prepared alternate. We are going to do another in our spy series, and then we're going to start our Halloween episodes, the episode after next. So prepare for 3 weeks, 3 episodes of spooky topics, which will be TBD.
Yeah, as always, it's one of my favorite series of episodes of the year. So very excited for that. But yeah, Malcolm, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me. I haven't done a podcast in a while. I'm sure you guys can understand, like, getting out of the flow of it, and
Sure.
And my own is so sparing that just getting reached out to meant a lot. And then, your premise, it just left me wide open to play around, which was a joy. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for doing it. Zach, thank you as always.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for everyone here at The Revisionists, I'm Brian Flynn.
I'm Zach Powers.
Have a good time.
Do it. I'm doing it right now.
September 4th, 1666. In London, England, the worst day of destructive damage from the Great Fire occurs. The exact cause of the fire is unclear, but one of Charles II's 19 children's gender reveal party seems like a safe bet. September 4th, 1781. Los Angeles is founded as El Pueblo de Nuestra Señora de Riana de Los Angeles, the village of Our Lady, the Queen of the Angels, by 44 Spanish settlers, each of whom got to pick one word to be in the name. September 4th, 1950. Darlington Raceway is the site of the inaugural Southern 500, the first 500-mile NASCAR race. The 6-hour race took 6 hours, during which spectators were described as watching cars drive around for 6 hours, at which points the cars stopped driving and everyone went home to recharge for next year, when they would again watch the cars go for 6 hours.
September 4th, 1781. The city of Los Angeles is founded by 44 Spanish settlers who all split a 2-bedroom in Silver Lake. September 4th, 1998. 2 students at Stanford, Larry Page and Sergey Brin, established Google. Their first goals are raising investment money, refining their search algorithms, and hunting down and executing Jeeves.